and record.
Okay, I think we're on. I think we're live. Welcome everybody to Green Apple Books and Music in San Francisco's first online author event featuring Bonnie Tsui, Daniel Handler, and Andrew Sean Greer. They're going to be discussing Bonnie's new book, Why We Swim, among other things. And I'm going to let them take it away from here, and I'm going to try and disappear. And please write any questions you might have for any of the three presenters, and they will try and get to it at some point. Have fun, you guys.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Hello. I'm your captain.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Daniel Handler, and thank you for attending. I'm seeing 104 participants, which is fantastic. For a book that is very dear to my heart, and we appreciate people coming out by staying in and logging on to a confusing thing. There's the book, Why We Swim by Bonnie Tsui. She is a journalist and longtime contributor to the New York Times. That's where I first came across her work. And this new book, Why We Swim, is a cultural and scientific explanation of our human relationship with water and swimming. Her parents met in a swimming pool in Hong Kong, which is like, I feel like we have to start there.
Origin story. I have a pretty good photo that I want to show you all.
Oh, nice.
Oh, sorry, hang on. Babes.
Yeah.
I think my mom's watching. I'm not doing that just because my mom's watching. Hi, Mom.
I'm crushing out equally on both of them. Is that a photograph of when they met?
It is early on. So my dad was a lifeguard at a pool. So this is at the beach in Hong Kong, but they met in a swimming pool, and my dad was a lifeguard there. My mom was a swimmer. Mom's an excellent swimmer. She didn't need anyone to save her, but we definitely got our love of swimming, a lifetime of that from them. And like my brother and I grew up on the swim team. We became lifeguards like our dad, and so it's definitely where it all started. But I think that the frame of the book is that personal story, but because I'm a journalist, I had to find other stories that are better and fill in the structure of the book is, the question is of course why we swim, but it's also first and foremost it's survival. It's we swim so that we can survive the water, and then once we can do that, swimming can become so much more to us, and so it can become well-being, a way to find health and healing, community through a team, through the Dolphin Club, which you will be talking about, I hope, today, and competition and flow. And so there's all these, and also I think I want to say right now, a way of finding escape. I mean, at least for me, it's always been a wonderful place to immerse myself, the water is, and just have no one and nothing touch me for a while other than the water, just to be there, having that physical relationship to the water as well as mental.
And did you tell me about your childhood swimming, particularly with a mom who was a strong swimmer? Like, did you have that connection?
Well, obviously we started swimming because my parents were afraid that we were going to drown. And so, I mean, it was like, but, my mom was very practical. My dad is a little more dreamy, but she said, if they're going to go swim in the neighbor's pool or, in the bathtub, they're going to take lessons. So we started swimming really early, like 5 and 6. And and then we took lessons, and then we joined the swim team when we were 8 or so. Yeah. So, and my own kids now are 7 and 9, and I have, made them do that because it's in my DNA to do it.
Did you feel immediately a powerful connection to the water? I mean, I also, was taught to swim because I wanted me to drown, and here we are in California. And my mom actually she can swim a little bit, but she felt like she missed that time where she got a real fluency in the water, and she didn't want to So my sister and I had swimming lessons from a really young age, but we both really took to it. I mean, we
Yeah.
both, were like endlessly puckered. We were the kids who were like being yelled at
Puny,
by adult stuff.
right?
Just get out of the water now and have a sandwich. You have to.
Like
And with
blue
that,
lips, pretty fingers. Yeah.
that your
We
experience?
we went to Jones Beach a lot. So I grew up in New York, and we went to Jones Beach, and we would spend days, like long afternoons out there, just yeah, we would jump up and down on the waves, and then we would run back to the hotel, and then we would jump up and down on the waves and run back to the hotel. And that was just like the rhythm of that. Like I think about it, and it puts me immediately back in that space. And it's just really, it's very cool to suddenly be back there, even now as I'm talking about it, that I know that I'm just there. Yeah. Actually, I realized that we forgot to talk about these.
Oh, do tell.
Do tell. So my friend Anna, she knows this wonderful designer in London, Alexander Brown, and she said, you need to get these swim tiles for your book. And so Alex made these tiles for the book, especially for Why We Swim. And so everyone who pre-orders the book at Green Apple today gets entered into a giveaway, because we promised free stuff for one of 3 tiles that we have. So I just wanted to float that out there.
Which I feel like, being as we're having this conversation with cocktails, we should say that they may serve as coasters.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, right here.
You don't have to say to yourself, well, 3 tiles, that's not enough to completely redo my bathroom. You can say to yourself, no, I am going to buy Why We Swim.
They're decorative.
And so what was the, I mean, you have written about a wide variety of topics for the Times, certainly. And I'm curious how it was to approach this while having such a strong personal connection to the material.
It was really hard. It was actually, I thought about the structure for a long ass time. And because once I decided that I wanted to write a book about swimming, and obviously when you write one book, everyone wants to know what the next one is. And for a long time, I didn't know what that was.
Ooh.
You probably had a whole train of them in front of you when someone asked you that, but I did not. I did not know what was on the horizon. So I knew that I wanted to write a book about swimming, but I didn't know what form it would take. And so when I finally decided that I was going to do it, I started gathering stories. And so it was just sort of this amorphous blob of just great stories, but I didn't know how to organize it. And then a really smart editor friend of mine said, why don't you just call it something very simple, like Why We Swim? And it just, I kid you not, it was like a religious moment where everything just like fell into these 5 thematic baskets. And then it was just like, oh, and then it just made sense. Like it all then, there was a narrative flow through the book from survival all the way to flow. And all of those threads, came together. Oh, hi.
Sorry.
Special guest?
Roll, who's terrified of the water. Yes, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Yeah.
Co-captain.
I think your book is like the great book about swimming. Many people have approached this book and have approached this topic, and it can either be kind of endlessly historical and scientific, and often, I think, lightly scientific in the way that people who aren't scientists read a couple of articles and then write a book. And I think you really managed to capture the essence of this very emotional and, dare I say, even spiritual experience that happens from swimming in large bodies of water. And I know me and our other guest, Andrew Greer, who is having some technological issues, but he and I swim together a lot at the Bay Dolphin Club. And I know it has been kind of life-changing experiences for both of us. And so it's one of the reasons I was so excited about this book, is that I think if you're a writer and you do this kind of swimming, you have this fantasy that you could write a book about it. And so for me, the book was not only a joy, but like this enormous sigh of relief of like, oh, finally, someone else have to worry about it anymore. But did you feel, I mean, I would have felt a lot of trepidation about writing about this thing. It is really enormous. It has
hell yes. I started to think about, early on in the process, I thought about, there's so many books about running, right?
Yeah.
I think of Born to Run as a sort of gold standard of a book that kind of pulls together all these narrative threads and the emotional stuff and just the grander view of our human relationship with something physical like that.
Right.
Agree. But there are so many books about, like, you know, the mechanics of running, the history of running, the evolution, but, you know, science. And I started thinking about why, and wondering why there wasn't a swimming book, a book that did that for swimming, that had a narrative, because I wanted to tell not just, I didn't want it to be a personal story. You know, my story is just a frame. I'm the guide to bring you to these people and stories, right, in the outside world that resonate, I think, on a larger scale. And I wanted to make that book, and I think that once I settled on that structure, and then having themes to kind of knock about in and have bits of history and bits of evolution, of science, but also really that, like, very human, character-driven story in each section to anchor it. And so, you know, I didn't know if it was going to succeed. I was scared of it, but I wanted to try, and I knew that I wanted to try when I couldn't stop thinking about it. Yeah, over years, years and years and years.
That's how they get you. That's how the book.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, forget about money, forget about all that other stuff. You have to write it.
Right. Are you doing something that you should be focusing on, but you're thinking about something else? That's when you know you're trapped and you got to write a book. Do you have, is there a favorite story of yours in the book? There's so many good ones, and I don't want to give them all away.
You know, I think
Barbara also wants to know that.
Barbara wants to know. Wait, let me see what Barbara wants to know.
She said, I love to swim and would love to hear your favorite swim.
That's really hard. That's like, you know, your kids choosing amongst you. But so the opening story of the book is a story that my husband told me one night over dinner, and it's about this Icelandic fisherman who one winter night in 1984 fell overboard off his fishing vessel off the coast of Iceland, and he swam. Everyone died. He swam 6 hours in 41-degree water. So 41-degree water, you maybe last 20 minutes, 30 minutes max. Hypothermia will claim you, you will drown. He swam for 6 hours, and not only that, when he got to the coast of this island that he is from, it's an archipelago. It's lava formed. He hit these cliffs of like 100 feet, couldn't get out, had to get back in, swim again, and then it's just, you know, walking across this spiky lava field, and he gets across the snow and finally gets to town, and they take him to a hospital, and they cannot find his heartbeat, and he's not showing any signs of hypothermia, and he's only a little dehydrated. And so it turns out that this man, his name is Gudliger Friðþórsson, but his nickname is Loye, so everyone calls him Loye. His body resembled a seal's in that his body fat was like 2 to 3 times normal human thickness. And so it kept his core warm. And anyone who swims in the bay knows that would really help you, because you can swim for a while, but then you start the after drop. Actually, you get out of the water, you may feel fine, but your core temperature keeps dropping. And so in the shower, this is what I experienced, some of you guys, is that hot water's coming and you're still shaking. You can't control yourself because you have mild hypothermia. That this like effect of being in the cold water just like takes over your body. And he was fine because of that. And it turns out from this biological quirk that he was, you know, more marine mammal than terrestrial, that he was able to survive this and became famous the world over. He did all these, you know, medical research experiments, and was like, that story to me was the siren song that said, I want something like that. And then the first part of the book is about him. And he's this very reclusive guy, but he became very important and an important and good friend of my family's, you know, over the course of writing this book. And but his story was such that it reminded me that we're not so far removed from the sea. And I wanted some of that magic to infiltrate the book.
Yeah. It's a really, it's a scary story when you read it.
It's a very scary story.
And I think that there's nobody who hasn't been in swimming in open water for a while who doesn't have a scary story. This is another questions, but it's something I wanted to talk to you about because I've been swimming in the bay, I guess about 5 years, and I have had 2 really terrifying experiences.
Hi, Andy.
Joyous experience of having Mr. Andrew Sean Greer join us. Hello, Andy.
Wait, are you muted? I can't tell. Yeah, you might be muted.
We're making some slow progress.
How many writers does it take to do a Zoom?
My swimming partner often at the Dolphin Club. But I wanted to ask you about that because you have had your own scary experiences as well.
Yeah.
Which I think enabled you to write very well about these experiences, because I think some people who have not swum in open water kind of feel like, well, you fall off a boat and then you swim and you climb yourself up on a rock and you go out to lunch later.
That was definitely something that I wanted to talk to both of you about this evening, because that is just an entirely, to dance near that border, right? That porousness between states, I guess is what I describe it in the book, how I describe it in the book. There's something very sobering about it, but also it makes you feel so alive to get close to death, right? And that's why we love survival stories. We love, we want to know what someone who gets close to that edge has to report back to us, right? And so when we feel I mean, every time I go out at Ocean Beach, every time I go out open water swimming, I always feel a sense of that. Even if it's not a huge, overwhelming sense of that, it is always there. It is never gone when I swim in open water. And I assume it's the same for you both.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's funny because you said that's what's so appealing about those nature and terror stories. And I was kind of the opposite. Whenever I heard a story like that, like whenever I read Into the Wild or I heard other stories, kind of that, I was of course engrossed and often sympathetic, but I also had this thing of like, do not do that. Don't climb up the Himalayas. It's crazy. Like, I'm sorry that happened to you, but here it is. And then when I was swimming in the open water and something scary happened to me, that was one of my thoughts, like literally while it was happening. I thought, oh, this is why. Like, you have this connection, you want to do this thing, and the fact that a scary thing might happen to you turns out to be not a deterrent to doing it. And I'm not generally a brave person, so it took me a while to kind of actually manage that calculus. And I think that you portray that very well in your book, that it's a very dangerous world to go out and swim in the open water. And maybe now we're having this conversation and we're forced to have it because we live in a dangerous world right this very second, it can be more kind of relatable that we all know we all know we're going to go to a restaurant again. We're not going to stop. You know, we're going to go again.
We're going to hug people. We're going to want to be near them.
And so I think you handle that that edge very closely. Have you had a scary experience yourself that you want to tell us? Because we know those stories are so engrossing.
Oh, heck yeah. I feel like I don't know if there's one that I can point to right now because there have been many of them. I mean, I'm not I'm not a daredevil, but it's just that, the feeling at least. I don't know. Andy, do you have one that you want to share?
Well, I mean, I remember early on when Daniel and I started swimming, we had we would love to swim out to the opening, which is right where you sort of right at the edge of the protected cove, and you're getting out into the bay itself in front of Alcatraz, and that's where the waters could take you anywhere. And we just wanted to look at Golden Gate Bridge, and the tide kind of turned on us, and we were suddenly finding ourselves not able to get back in.
Yeah.
And it turns out we could have just gone down to the next pier and gone, like we wouldn't have died. But the feeling was, and I remember Daniel said at the end of it, he was like, "Oh, this is how it ends." Yeah, he was very nonchalant. I find you very brave out there, Daniel.
Well, the line between bravery and stupidity is always thin, I think. But yeah, I mean, the scariest experience that I had is that I swim regularly at the Dolphin Club, and Andy often swims with me. And I would say open water swimming, there are a lot of things like this, but open water swimming is one of them that is like drinking, that everybody who does it less than you is no fun, and everybody who does it more than you has a problem. Most people in the world, yeah, exactly. So most people in the world think that it's crazy to swim in open water anyway. But then by the standards of the Dolphin Club, Andy and I are both very conservative swimmers.
Yeah.
And other people are crazy. But I went and took a friend once, and she had swum with me in very warm water. Hadn't swum with me here. And so I said, well, we're going to be very careful. And we took this very careful route. And then she said, I really want to do more. It didn't feel right to me, but she was my friend, and we'd swum together and, let people make their own choices. And so we went out, and the tide was against us. And she said, oh, it's so beautiful, and thank you for taking me out here. And I said, like, it's time to go back now. We got to go back. And we went back, and it was really, really hard. And then she nudged me. And so I stopped swimming, and I turned to look at her, and she said, I'm not going to make it. And I was like, what do you mean you're not going to make it? That's not you're not like backing out of a pub crawl or something. Like, you're not leaving early at a rock show because the opening band was so terrible that you want to go home. Like, there's no other try. You have to make it. And she swam, she kind of left the water and swam over to the seawall, where she grabbed onto this like cement tiling. And
barnacle covered,
grabbed it. It was already ripping her, and I realized that she was irrational because of hypothermia. And it was, oh my God,
that's so scary.
My concentration had been like, I'm just going to keep her morale up, and then we're both going to go back into the water. And now I thought, I do not know what to do. And that was a very, that was like the elevator falling inside you feeling. It was really, really scary for me. And it worked out fine, but I just remember, and because hypothermia will kind of rob you of reason sometimes. When we were in safety, she like had a donut, and she was like, okay, that was kind of crazy, but that was fun, and I was like,
yeah, so the kind of foggy, gauzy memory of it.
Yeah. Like, she was like, well, it turned out fine. I was like, that one's never going to be fine again. It was a horrible.
I feel like we need to paint a little bit more of a vivid picture for people who don't know where we're talking about around Aquatic Park and the seawall. And once you kind of like push out through this little, that opening into the open bay, that you get out, you're swimming here, it's calm. And then you swim through this little keyhole, and then it's like either the current is taking you out the Golden Gate, or it's rushing you into the bay. And so it's like, if you stop swimming, it's like this, like conveyor belt. So
Yeah.
if you don't time the tides right.
It's the difference between kind of running on an outdoor track, right? It's outdoors and it's beautiful, that it is a track that someone has built, or just like running into the woods, you know, and that's what it feels like. So there's a little, if you live in San Francisco, and you've ever visited one of the historical ships or gone to Ghirardelli Square, you've probably seen this area that has a lot of boats in it, and that's where people swim. And it's very protected. It's still, there's still danger of hypothermia, and it still can be super challenging, but it is a kind of hemmed in area. And then you can go out, and that's the bay, and you're at the mercy of the tides, and you're at the mercy of enormous ships. You know, there's a lot of, the bay is a working port, and the
sea lion.
Yeah,
Sea lions, yeah.
Sea lions and seals. Yeah, ships don't pay attention to you, and the sea lions and seals kind of might pay attention to you, which is its whole other terror. Kristen Rubin writes in, actually, she writes in and then says, "Hi, my name is Karen." So I don't know if it's Kristen Rubin or Karen, my apologies. Continuing with the theme of fear, I have both a profound love and a spirit connection with the open water, and also carrying with me strong abstract fears of creatures in the dark unknown of the water. What have you learned about that kind of more abstract fear that seems a companion to the love of water? And she, I mean, I think she hits that nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's very, very beautiful. But there's something deep and spooky about what you don't know about underwater.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be swimming along and you'll hit seaweed, or what you think is and hope is seaweed. And there is an instinct. I just remember the first time I swam from Alcatraz to Aquatic Park, and I'm swimming, and then I hit the seaweed, and before I can't, it's not even a thought in my brain. There's no thought in my brain except my body just rears back and jerks back, because that is how visceral it is.
Yeah,
and
it's like, twig snapping when you're camping.
Yeah.
Like one twig snaps and you're like, I'm surrounded by bears, this is the end, we're all gonna die. Yeah. And really it's like an 8 rolling over.
So like a rational person might ask, why are you doing this, friend? Tell us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what you strike very, very well in Why We Swim, available at Green Apple Books. You strike this, I think you really lead us to an understanding of how certain people's connection to the water when they find it like this is entirely irrational and goes at some deeper or even instinctive level that really cannot be rationalized away. And I think it's with all kind of all the enormous choices we make in life, right? Like love is not worth it. You fall in love with someone and that is the person that you will yell at hardest in your whole life and be yelled at hardest in your whole life. And that's a strange thing to know, and yet we're all going to do it. And I think it's to me that feels like a very similar connection.
Andy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always shied away from any of the sports that involve putting yourself in danger and retrieving yourself from that danger as the purpose of the sport. Skiing is one that I think of that way. And I somehow can't overcome my fear to relax enough to do the sport itself. But swimming, because you take yourself out there and then coming back is so necessary that you have to do it. And then I find myself like really pleased that this is the one sort of somewhat scary sport that I can conquer, and I feel amazing at the end of it. You know, I haven't done anything like what you've done, Bonnie, you know.
I don't know. I mean, the stories you guys are telling about being out there in the bay together, I haven't done that as many times as you. And every time I do it, it's terrifying. It really is. Because even though I know that I'm supposed to be cutting this angle, the tide is starting to shift, so I've got to do this, it's still like the quickness with that swing is always alarming to me. And I know that I'm a strong swimmer. I just don't know if I'm gonna make. I can put my head in that space where your friend was just like, I don't think I'm gonna make it back. I mean, it is like a thing that's knocking around in there.
It's also an enormous counter argument, I think, to the instinctive egotism that human beings have.
Yeah.
Things I feel, you know, because sometimes there's a little chalkboard at the Dolphin Club, and before you go into the water, you can read the temperature and which way the tide is going and when the tide came in and when it came out, and you can read these things. You get out there sometimes and, you know, the ocean hasn't read that chart.
Not subscribing to your
promise that is written with nothing but the best of intentions on a chalkboard is actually entirely irrelevant to the situation that you're in. And I just think in a world, you know, increasingly in such a privileged location as San Francisco, and we're all kind of first worlders living here. Oh my goodness!
There's a silent
anyway,
synchronized swimming ballet here. That is the interlude.
So now we have some very special guests who are going to be
Feel like
doing...
some Teddy, everyone. Feel like some Teddy.
Yeah.
That's just
All right.
to remind us of time. We've got some more time, a little bit of time left to take more questions.
Because as they dance, so they're going to dance behind you. What's going to happen?
They did that, and then now they're gone.
That was it.
Yeah,
That was good.
It was
That
not
was
a planned thing. It was just you know.
I was up for 5 minutes for sure. But I'm scrolling through some of the questions, some of which more or less have been answered. There are definitely some people who are curious about the Dolphin Club versus the South End Club, which are the two swim clubs in San Francisco, which share a building and are nevertheless philosophical opposites. And we should mention that Pete, who is our host today at Green Apple Books, is a member of the South End Club. So we have nothing but respect and admiration for whatever choice you make, except that the Dolphin Club is clearly superior and the South End Club is just a bunch of miserable lowlifes. But other than that,
well, you've got two versus Pete is mute right now, so he can't speak for himself. But I will also speak for, say, Kim Chambers, who is a prominent character in the book. She said she was a middle child, and she's a member of both clubs. And that's the way to do it, maybe. I don't know. Is that even allowed? Do you let her do it?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think what is super interesting is that I had this kind of vague desire to start swimming more in the open water. And what I came across in the Dolphin Club and the South End Club is this very intense subculture. So it's almost as if, you know, one day you decide you're going to grow orchids and then you meet everyone from the Orchid Thief. You know, you meet this that's going on. And I've never been part of a subculture that had a very specific thing in common and kind of nothing else in common.
Mm-hmm. I think there's something so beautiful about that.
Yeah.
Me too. So, I really like, I mean,
Andy can talk to it.
Oh, I mean, I'm not a joiner. Probably none of us really are. And so having been sort of led into this group, I love it because there's something, you know, funny and macho about the men and the women, about, you know, fraternal.
Yeah,
that's funny. Sure. It's like an environment I've fled from all my life of like sort of like towels whipping in the locker room kind of thing that I think is hilarious. That's where I am.
But really it's all in this, like there's that, but it's all so loving and it's so obviously loving. You know, even the whole thing with like, you're not supposed to wear wetsuits. Like if anyone shows up in a wetsuit, you're like, yes, come in, come swim with us. It's not like that. It's not exclusive. And I think that, I mean, to take it a little bit, expand it a bit outside of Dolphin Club, South End, just open water swimming and just the swimming in general and like locker rooms. My friend Leslie wants to know about, you know, talking a little bit about the sort of camaraderie of, I mean, have always wanted to, I've been meaning to write this essay about locker rooms, because there is something about what I experienced in the locker room that's like this tableau on aging, and it's all these different bodies, and and you're also like kind of like mashed up against each other, and it's sort of awkward. You're putting on, and it's unlovely. It's very awkward, but it's just also something very wonderful about the you don't care. You're just there, and you're literally naked with each other, and then you'll be out on the street, and Daniel, you and I have talked about this, where you don't recognize someone with their clothes on. You don't know who those people are, and you say, oh yeah, sorry, I really like literally did not recognize you with your clothes on. And that you don't know anyone. You don't.
You'll find in some situation, I just saw someone actually right kind of before the lockdown. One of my last to the restaurant is that I walked into one, and there was someone from the Dolphin Club there, and my first thought was like, I didn't know you went to restaurants.
You exist only there.
She totally does. She doesn't just swim. Yeah, but it is like seeing your dentist at a nightclub or something.
You guys, we have a couple minutes left, and as I've been monitoring the questions coming in, there were just a couple that I wanted to get to. One is for Bonnie specifically. Someone asked you if you could talk about the samurais who swim vertically or something.
Yes, samurai swimming. Okay, this is going to take up too much time, but I'm going to make it really quick. Japan has a tradition of samurai swimming, and that is basically, think about the Japanese martial art, swimming martial art. Nobody knows about it. It's like judo or kendo, and it is the swimming part of it. And there are levels. You can become a master as well, and I went to Japan to learn about it. I was really excited with the Olympics, because they're actually, they were planning an exhibition of this classical swimming tradition at the Olympics, and of course it's been postponed to next year. Hopefully we will all get to see that next summer. But it was this magical, think about it, just the zen of swimming, and then it's like, subsumed into this, like what was originally a martial art, that the samurai clans had different styles of swimming that evolved to protect these different parts of Japan. If they lived on the coast, if they lived on a lake, if they lived in rivers, and to protect their feudal lands. And so they evolved all these different techniques to, one of my favorites is that they can quietly tread water. Actually, that egg beater technique is a basis of synchronized swimming today. But that was like in samurai scrolls, like hundreds of years ago. And so they would do this quiet egg beater. And then you can shoot an arrow. They would be able to do all these things, like write on scrolls and shoot arrows and stuff. And or wear like many pounds, 25 pounds of armor. Read the book. There's so much I want to tell you, but I can't.
Read the book.
Read the book.
Read the book.
It's an astonishing part of the book. Yeah. And I often say this at the end of book events, and so I will say it now, that I have a very narrow list of spiritual beliefs. But one of them is that if you enter the space of an independent bookstore and you leave without buying a book, you're committing a sin.
We're in that space right here.
We are
invisible audience.
Green Apple can check their received orders. I ordered a bunch of books from Green Apple today, because I knew that if I were at Green Apple Books right now and I were doing this event, I would have a lovely time, and then there'd be a big long line for Bonnie to sign her book, and I would wander the shelves and I would end up spending $75. And so pretend you're at a book event now. Please get in line and buy Bonnie's wonderful book about swimming, Why We Swim, which will enter you into a drawing to win some coasters, or as some people call them, tiles.
Whatever. You don't even have to stand in line. You just do it.
That's right. And while you're at it, why not purchase something else like Green Apple Books, which is happy to mail you books. I happen to know that you're stuck in your home. I happen to know that you don't have enough to read. And I happen to know that you should be supporting Green Apple Books and not committing what is, in my mind, an egregious sin.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Don't be that person, folks, invisible people.
So thanks so much for coming out.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you all so much. Love you. Thank you. Wonderful.
Bye.
Bye-bye.